Chapter 12. Sparks before the storm. The night was heavy with the scent of rain, clouds rolling low above the palace walls. The court had long since dispersed, yet the tension lingered in the corridors like smoke. Vikram walked beside Harshavardhan, their footsteps echoing in the deserted hallway. They had spoken of politics all day, of borders and alliances, but now the air between them was different. Charged, sharp, dangerous. Vikram broke the silence first. "You guard her too closely, Harsh." His voice was calm, but there was a challenge in it. "She is beautiful. Any man would be drawn to her. Why hide her in shadows as if she were a secret?" Harshavardhan stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "Because she is not yours to look at." Vikram smiled faintly, the expression laced with provocation. "You speak as if she is yours, but I have not heard you name her as such. If you do not claim her, Harsh, do not be surprised when another man does." The words struck like fire to dry tinder. Harshavardhan turned, his eyes dark with fury, his voice low and lethal. "Careful, Vikram. Friendship has its limits. Do not cross them." Vikram did not back down. He leaned in slightly, his tone dropping, almost mocking. "Then claim her. Or admit that you fear what lies in her eyes, that she might choose differently if she had the chance." The silence that followed was razor-sharp. Harshavardhan's fists clenched at his sides, his breath unsteady. For the first time in years, the bond of their brotherhood teetered on the edge of breaking. Finally, Harshavardhan forced himself to turn away, his control fraying but not yet lost. "Do not test me again," he said, each word a warning carved in stone. But later that night, as he walked into his private chambers, he found Mohini waiting for him, her veil drawn, her hands folded nervously. She had heard fragments of the whispers, seen the fire in his eyes. And though she said nothing, her silence accused him, her presence demanded answers. Harshavardhan closed the door behind him, the storm outside mirroring the one within. He searched her face, almost desperate, as though her calm expression might yield the answers he himself could not name. Arjun's words echoed in his mind, words that had unsettled him earlier, questions about love, about bonds he had never dared to admit even to himself. Yet now, standing before her, he could not bring himself to confess what his heart beat so violently to deny. Her composure only sharpened the fury in his chest. The serenity in her eyes, the stillness of her form, seemed to mock the storm raging within him. His voice was harsh when he spoke. "Why do you stand so calmly when I—" He stopped, unable to finish, the weight of his own turmoil pressing him into silence. But Mohini, unshaken, finally broke hers. "There are matters greater than your anger, Maharaj. Tonight I bring word that cannot wait." Her words were quiet, but they cut through his unrest. She stepped forward, her eyes steady, her voice low. "The whispers in the city are true. The rebels plot more than insurrection. They plan to unleash an epidemic upon your people. And the Tamira tribe—" She paused as if weighing the gravity of her revelation. "They were never traitors. They were used as pawns. Their knowledge of herbs and medicines was twisted, forced into service. They were building an antidote, one the rebels meant to steal, to turn into a weapon against your kingdom." The storm in Harshavardhan's heart collided with the storm of her words, Fury, confusion, and a dawning dread settled over him. Mohini's gaze did not waver. You needed the truth, and now you have it. For the first time that night, Harshavardhan faltered, not before Vikram, not before his enemies, but here, before her. Chapter 13. A Truth Unspoken. The gardens of the palace were quiet at dusk, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine. The fountains whispered their songs, and lanterns flickered along the stone paths. Mohini often came here to find silence away from the court's ceaseless noise. But she wasn't alone. Vikram of Vaishali appeared, his steps deliberate, his eyes fixed on her with the same restless curiosity he had shown since his arrival. He carried none of the restraint that Harshavardhan did. His words were direct, his gaze unashamed. "Mohini," he began, his voice low, urgent, "I have watched you. The prince may not see it, or perhaps he pretends not to, but the air changes when you enter a room. There is something between you and him." Mohini stilled, her veil fluttering faintly in the evening breeze. She did not speak. Vikram stepped closer, his tone softening. "Tell me the truth. Do you love him?" Her heart gave a painful twist, but she forced her voice steady. "Love is not the question here, Vikram. Even if it were, what future could it hold? He is a royalty, a prince destined to be king. His duty demands alliances, heirs, and perhaps more wives than one woman's heart could endure." Vikram frowned. "And yet you suffer in silence for him?" She shook her head, her eyes burning though her voice remained calm. "No, I cannot. I will not. I would want to belong wholly to the man I give myself to call him mine and mine alone. With Harshavardhan, such a dream is impossible. To expect it from him would be selfish, dangerous. He belongs not to me, but to his people, his kingdom. And I understand that." Her words fell like quiet stones into the still water of the garden fountain. What she didn't know was that someone else had heard them. In the shadows behind the marble archway, Harshavardhan stood, his body tense, his hands clenched at his sides. The flames of the lanterns reflected in his eyes, but it was not light. It was fire. Her voice echoed in his ears. "I cannot be with him. I want a man I could call my own." For a man who commanded armies and bent kingdoms to his will, those words cut deeper than steel. When Vikram finally left her with a long, troubled look, Mohini lingered in the garden, unaware of the storm that brewed just beyond the arch. Harshavardhan did not step out, not yet. His jaw was set, his rage contained only by the thinnest thread of control. It wasn't her refusal that burned him. It was the truth she had given another man. Truth she had never dared to speak to him. And that night, as he strode back to his chambers, his heart thundered with a single, searing thought. She owes me those words. She owes me her truth, and I will have it, even if I must rip down every wall she hides behind. Chapter 14. Moonlit Reckoning. The palace lay wrapped in silence, the courtyard silvered in the glow of the full moon. The marble floors reflected the pale light, and the air seemed alive, charged with a strange, restless energy. Mohini moved swiftly along the corridor, her veil drawn close, seeking the solitude of her chambers. But her path was blocked. Harshavardhan stepped from the shadows, the moonlight, cutting sharp lines across his face. His eyes blazed, not with the cool composure of a prince, but with the wild, untamed fire of a man betrayed. "You speak freely to Vikram," he said, his voice low, dangerous, "yet to me, you keep your silence." Mohini froze, her breath faltering. She lowered her gaze, steadying herself. "You heard." "I heard enough," he bit out, stepping closer. The air between them trembled with his restrained fury. "That you cannot be with me. That I'm too bound to duty, too chained to my crown. That you wish for a man you could call your own." She pressed her palms together, her voice soft but resolute. "It is the truth, Prince. A truth I had no courage to give you." He caught her wrist, pulling her closer, his breath hot against her temple. "And you had the courage to give it to another man? To my friend?" His tone cracked like a whip, and the moonlight gleamed in his eyes with something feral. "You deny me your truth, yet bear it for him." Mohini tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Her heart raced, her voice breaking. "Because you would not understand, because your pride blinds you, because if I had spoken, you would have torn me apart with your blind rage." His chest rose sharply, the words cutting through him. For a long moment, silence stretched. Only the rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds filled the air. Then slowly, he leaned down, his lips hovering dangerously close to hers, his voice trembling with a storm barely leashed. "You think I do not know my limits, Mohini? That I would shatter what I wish to protect? You think me so cruel." His thumb brushed against her jaw, tracing fire across her skin. "You are wrong." Her eyes met his, wide, defiant, yet glistening with fear and longing. The moon bathed them in silver, the world shrinking until there was nothing left but the pounding of their hearts. He bent closer still, his voice dropping to a whisper that seared her skin. "Yet tonight, under this cursed moon, every instinct in me screams to claim you, to brand you as mine. Not a prince's, not a king's. Mine." Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. He released her wrist suddenly, stepping back, his chest heaving as if he had fought a battle with himself. "You are right," he said bitterly, his voice breaking into ragged control. "I am bound. To my crown, to my people. But never mistake that for my weakness, Mohini. For when I choose, when I truly choose, I do not share what is mine." His jaw tightened, every muscle straining with the effort of restraint. His voice, rough and unsteady, carried the weight of a torment far greater than fury. "And yet, tell me now," he demanded, each word breaking as if torn from him. "Is there truly nothing in your heart for me?" He paused, his gaze burning into hers, the silence between them unbearable. "If not," he continued, softer but more lethal, "then you need not fear me. I will never speak of it again. But know this, your silence tonight will bury what could have been forever." Her silence was weighted, fierce, unbearable. The moon's cold silver bared her every secret, leaving her nowhere to hide. Her lips quivered, her voice breaking as the dam inside her gave way. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried to kill it, to smother it. But the truth, Prince, the truth is, I love you." The world stilled. Harshavardhan staggered as if struck, his chest rising and falling like a man on the edge of madness. His hand rose, shaking, grazing her cheek as though afraid she would vanish. "Say it again," he demanded, his voice a broken prayer. Mohini's eyes glistened, but her words came firm, steady, unshakable this time. "I love you, Harshavardhan." It shattered him. With a sound that was half growl, half plea, Harshavardhan crushed her against him, his lips descending on hers. The kiss was wildfire, desperate, consuming, unrestrained. Not the claiming of a king, but the surrender of a man undone by love. Her hands trembled against his chest, then curled into his robes, as though anchoring herself to the very storm she had tried to escape. When at last he tore his lips from hers, his forehead pressed to hers, his voice ragged and reverent. "Do you know what you've done, Mohini?" She closed her eyes, her tears wetting his skin. "I've spoken what my heart could no longer deny." The moon above burned brighter, as if sealing the vow neither of them had intended to make. And beneath its silver gaze, they stood, two souls torn by fate, yet bound by a truth that no denial could ever break. But even as the silence held them, a sudden tremor passed through Harshavardhan's body. His breath hitched, ragged and uneven. His eyes, moments ago ablaze with love and torment, now darkened with something more sinister. A flush of red streaked across the whites of his eyes, his veins tightening as his chest rose in sharp, desperate gasps. "Prince?" Mohini's voice quavered, panic seeping into her tone. She reached for him, but he staggered back, clutching his chest as though battling some unseen force. His body radiated a violent surge of energy, raw, predatorial, dangerous. The air thickened around him, his presence no longer that of a man, but of something untamed, feral. He shoved Mohini away with a force that was not his own, his roar muffled into a strangled cry as he collapsed to the marble floor, his body writhing. "Harshavardhan." Mohini dropped beside him, her hands trembling but determined. She knew this curse, this venom in his blood, poison, slow and insidious, now awakened by the night's fevered storm. Her eyes burned with tears, but her resolve did not falter. With swift hands, she drew a small vial from within the folds of her robes, its glass shimmering pale under the moonlight. Pulling him into her lap, she pressed the antidote to his lips, coaxing him to swallow, even as his body fought against her touch. For a terrible heartbeat, nothing happened. His breath came shallow, ragged, his grip tightening on her wrist with unnatural strength. Then slowly, the violent tremors eased. The redness in his eyes dimmed. His chest fell into a rhythm less tortured, his strength ebbing as the poison relented under her care. At last, his body slackened, the predatorial aura dissolving into fragile humanity once more. Harshavardhan's head slipped against her shoulder, his weight heavy but his face peaceful, softened in the tender vulnerability of sleep. Mohini held him there, her tears falling silently into his hair. The courtyard lay still, the moon their only witness, as she whispered into the night, her voice breaking. "Even if fate poisons you, I will be your cure." And with the prince asleep in her arms, not with resolution, but with a vow, unspoken yet stronger than any chain of crown or destiny. Chapter 15. The Restless Dawn. Harshavardhan woke up next morning to a world drenched in pain. The first thing he felt was the pounding in his head, sharp and merciless, each throb echoing like a war drum inside his skull. His throat burned, as though lined with fire, his body sluggish, heavy with the remnants of poison that last night's full moon had viciously awakened in his blood. A groan tore from his lips as he pushed himself upright. The silk sheets tangled around his bare chest, damp with fever sweat, clinging like shackles. The room swam before his vision, pillars of ivory and gold blurring into shadows. For a heartbeat, he thought he was still trapped in the fevered dream of last night. But then, her voice returned to him. "I love you." The memory struck him like a blade, faint, fractured, yet searing with a clarity that left him breathless. Had he imagined it in his delirium? Or had Mohini truly spoken the words that had haunted him in silence for so long? His jaw clenched as he pressed his fingers to his temple, willing the haze to clear. No dream, he told himself. It was no fevered lie. He remembered her eyes glistening, her trembling lips, the fierce strength in her final confession. The truth had been hers. She had said it. She had given him the words that could undo a king. And now, she was gone. By mid-morning, Harshavardhan's restlessness had consumed him. He scoured the palace corridors, his voice sharp, his stride uneven but relentless. Every chamber he passed, every shadowed alcove, he expected to see her slender form, the silken rustle of her garments. Servants bowed, ministers awaited his presence in court, but he dismissed them all with a growl that betrayed the storm raging inside him. "Where is she?" he demanded of the handmaidens. They lowered their eyes, stammering that they had not seen her since dawn. His heartbeat thundered, wild, ungovernable. He stalked to her chamber, empty. The faint scent of her lingered in the air, a ghost of jasmine that mocked his hunger for her presence. He touched the carved wooden frame of her door, his palm trembling, his chest heaving with the force of desire he could no longer bury. Every hour she remained unseen only tightened the noose around his sanity. By dusk, the great court sat in uneasy silence, its ministers whispering among themselves at their king's distraction. Harshavardhan's gaze was far away, fixed on the corridors beyond the gilded arches. Each time the door stirred, hope flared within him like lightning, only to die when it was not her. And beneath the torment, beneath the fury of his restless searching, one truth burned brighter than the poison that ravaged his veins. If Mohini's confession had been real, if her love was truly his, then nothing, not the crown, not fate, not even her own fear, would be allowed to keep her from him. Tonight, he vowed, he would find her, and when he did, there would be no escape. Chapter 16. The Note in the Dark. The night had grown heavy, its silence suffocating. The torches along the palace walls had burned low, shadows crawling across the marble floor like restless spirits. Yet Harshavardhan did not leave. He sat at the carved ebony table in his chamber, a goblet of untouched wine before him, his dark eyes fixed on the door, as though sheer force of will might summon her through it. Hours passed. His breath grew shallow, his muscles taut with a tension that bordered on torment. By midnight, patience, so uncharacteristic of a king, finally frayed into anger. Where was she? The thought lashed through him like a whip. The image of her lips trembling with confession, only to vanish without a trace, clawed at his chest. Rage and betrayal twisted together inside him, a storm he could no longer contain. His fist came down hard on the table. The goblet toppled, crimson spilling like blood across the polished surface. The echo of the strike reverberated through the chamber, and from the wooden crevice in the table's side, a sliver of parchment slipped loose, fluttering down like a secret too long hidden. Harshavardhan's breath caught. He snatched it up, his hands trembling despite the iron strength in his veins. The parchment bore her handwriting, delicate, hurried, yet unmistakably hers. "I knew you would do that," the note began, the words cutting through the storm of his rage. "Hence, just to avoid anybody seeing it, I left this for you. I have had to leave urgently, behind a lead on the antidote. We have very little time left, less than a month, before the poison consumes you completely. Do not speak to anyone until I return. And miss me." The last two words carried her, soft yet fierce, as though whispered against his skin. Harshavardhan's jaw slackened, the parchment trembling in his grip. His fury melted into something sharper, more dangerous, relief, pierced through with aching longing. His lips curved into the faintest of smiles, weary but edged with fire. She had not betrayed him. She had not run from him. She was fighting. For him. For them. The king closed his eyes, clutching the note as though it were her hand itself. The storm inside him stilled, though his chest ached with the hunger of her absence. For the first time in days, his breath slowed, a quiet vow forming in his heart. "Return to me, Mohini," he whispered into the night, the words fierce and raw. "And when you do, I will never let you go again." And with that, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, the warrior king allowed himself a rare thing, hope. Chapter 17. The Return. 10 days. 10 days of restless nights, of silent corridors echoing with absence. 10 days where Harshavardhan's iron will, once unshakable in war and throne, bent under the weight of 3 simple words: miss me. Every time the memory of them rose unbidden, his stern mouth betrayed him. Ministers, generals, even the council of sages watched, unsettled, as their king's lips curved into a faint secret smile, one that no decree or battle had ever inspired. Their whispered confusion only deepened his inner turmoil. A king should not dream. A king should not ache. And yet, Harshavardhan had found her in every silence, every shadow. The brush of her laughter in the wind, the ghost of her eyes in every reflection. And so he lay that night, stretched across his silken bed, the moonlight falling across him like a conspirator. His hand rested over the folded parchment he kept close, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm heavy with memory. It was then he heard it, the faintest shuffle, a footfall, soft as breath. His warrior's instincts tensed, his hand flying toward the dagger at his side, until a familiar silhouette filled the window frame. The veil, the poise, the daring audacity of slipping into a king's chamber as though it were her own. Mohini. She lifted her veil just enough for mischief to gleam in her eyes. Her voice, a teasing lilt, slipped into the air like forbidden silk. "Looks like someone has missed me." The word struck him harder than any blade. For an instant, the king, conqueror of lands, master of men, forgot speech entirely. His mouth opened, then shut. He shifted upright, every inch of his 6-foot frame rigid with the awkwardness of a boy caught in the act of dreaming. His silence was almost comical, his expression torn between anger and relief, pride and desperate joy. Mohini's lips curved knowingly. She stepped forward, her movements languid, deliberate, the soft swish of her robes whispering across the floor. "Strange," she murmured, circling closer, her eyes never leaving his. "The same king whose temper can set an entire court trembling cannot even look at me now." Harshavardhan swallowed, his jaw tightening, his voice struggling to form words. You vanished. For 10 days, Mohini. 10 endless days." 10 days, she repeated softly, coming to stand before him. Her hand rose, featherlight, brushing the sleeve of his robe. "And yet here you are, alive. And smiling in secret, I hear." His ears burned. The minister's flustered looks flashed in his mind, making his regal composure slip further. "Do not mock me," he muttered, though his tone lacked any real authority. But Mohini only tilted her head, eyes dancing. Instead of answering, she leaned in, so close that her veil brushed against his cheek, her whisper warm at his ear. "What if I do?" Harshavardhan froze, every muscle locked as the proximity robbed him of breath. For once he was utterly defenseless, not from poison, not from fate, but from the woman who dared to take the lead in his chamber. Her laughter was soft, hushed, the kind that curled around his heart and left him both mortified and undone. And in that moment, the great warrior king of Harshavardhan knew only one truth. Mohini's return had turned his world upside down once again. Mohini lingered close, her veil brushing against his jaw, her laughter, like silver bells, meant only for his ears. Her fingers, those daring, traitorous fingers, slid down the fabric of his robe, tracing the embroidered edges, though she had every right to explore him. Her eyes glittered behind the veil, mocking, challenging, delighting in his torment. "You look pale, Maharaj," she whispered, her voice wicked with tease. "Or perhaps flushed. Tell me, is it the poison still haunting you?" Her hand stilled suddenly, pressing lightly against his chest, right where his heart thundered like a war drum. "Or is it me?" Harshavardhan's throat worked, his breath jagged. His silence betrayed him more than words ever could. His hands tightened into fists at his sides, desperate to leash the fire she was stoking. But Mohini was merciless. She leaned closer still, her lips a breath away from his ear, her whisper soft and devastating. "I think," she said, her voice sultry, "you missed me more than you will ever admit." His composure cracked. The mighty king, who had endured the bite of poison and the weight of a crown, could no longer endure her. In a single, violent motion, his hand shot up, capturing her wrist. His other arm swept around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Her startled gasp ignited him further. "You dare!" he growled, his voice low and dangerous, trembling with the fury of restraint torn apart. "To play games with me, Mohini? You vanish for 10 days, return with your mocking laughter, and think I will let you toy with me?" She did not flinch. Her veil fluttered as she tilted her chin up, her eyes glittering with triumphant defiance. "Then do not let me, Harsh." The words undid him. With a sound that was half snarl, half plea, Harshavardhan crushed his mouth to hers. The kiss was no gentle caress. It was wildfire, feral and consuming. The collision of a king undone by longing and a woman reckless enough to tease his ruin. His grip tightened, one hand fisting in her veil, dragging it away so nothing separated her from the fury of his lips. Mohini melted against him, her laughter dissolving into a soft moan, her hands clutching his shoulders as though even she had not foreseen the storm she had unleashed. The world disappeared. The moonlight, the walls, the lingering poison, all swallowed by the searing blaze between them. When at last he tore his lips from hers, both of them were breathless, trembling, bound by a silence thick with desire. His forehead rested against hers, his voice ragged, broken open. "Never again," he whispered fiercely. "Never again will you vanish without my knowing. You belong to me, Mohini. Mine, as surely as this breath, as surely as this life. Do you hear me?" Her eyes, glistening in the shadows, held 100 secrets. But her trembling smile sealed only one truth. "Yes, I hear you." And the king, who had once been unyielding to all the world, yielded, at last, to her. Chapter 18. Morning's Reckoning. The dawn crept gently into the chamber, spilling molten gold over the silken drapes. The air still carried the faint musk of last night's storm, passion mingled with unshed words. Harshavardhan stirred awake, his body heavy with exhaustion, yet alive with a strange, restless fire. He turned, his gaze falling upon the empty space beside him. The sheet was still warm, carrying the delicate trace of her scent, jasmine and dusk, but she was gone. For a moment, panic struck like lightning. Had she slipped away again? Vanished like the elusive dream she had always been? He pushed himself upright, a sharp throb pounding in his skull. The poison, insidious, reminding him of its grip. He pressed his hand to his temple, trying to steady the storm raging inside. But more than the pain, it was her absence that twisted like a blade in his chest. His mind replayed the night in fragments, the fire in her eyes when she had teased him, the tremor in her lips when he had kissed her, the fierce surrender of her body in his arms. And above all, her whispered confessions still lingered like a haunting prayer. "I love you." The words were real. He had not dreamt them. Restless, he rose from the bed, his bare feet cold against the marble. His attendants knocked at the chamber doors, but he barked a single command. "Leave me!" The day passed in torment. Ministers droned about matters of state. But every time Harshavardhan caught the word misspoken in council, whether about missed accounts, missed deliveries, he flinched. A faint, unbidden smile would tug at his lips, remembering her last mocking note. The ministers exchanged bewildered glances. The king who once terrified them with a single glare now sat, lost in thought, lips curved in a secret smile that belonged to no kingdom but hers. But by nightfall, the smile had withered into impatience. She had not come to him. Not a glimpse, not a whisper, not even a rustle of her veil in the shadows. He dismissed the court early, retiring to his chambers. He sat at the edge of his bed, shoulders tense, fingers drumming on the carved wood. His breath grew heavier with each passing hour. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky with embers of crimson and gold. Harshavardhan's chambers glowed in the twilight, shadows stretching long and restless across the marble floor. He stood by the balcony, his back taut, his hands clenched on the rail, his mind still a battlefield of longing and impatience. The door creaked open. Mohini entered quietly, her veil trailing like a whisper of dusk. For once her laughter, her teasing spark was absent. Instead, Her eyes held a depth, a gravity that silenced the air between them. "You're late," Harshavardhan said at last, his voice low, edged with restrained fury. Was 10 days of silence not enough? Mohini. Her steps slowed, her gaze steady. "I know." And every moment of it burned me too harsh. His name on her lips softened something in him, but the storm in his chest refused to quiet. He turned sharply, his eyes narrowing, demanding an answer she had not yet given. Mohini drew closer until only the hush of twilight separated them. Her voice was steady, but beneath it pulsed urgency. "I left to cross-check the trail of the poison that runs in your veins. It is no ordinary venom. It was crafted, designed, by none other than Raj Rishi, your Prime Minister." The words struck him like an arrow. His breath stilled, his fists tightening. "Raj Rishi?" he repeated, his voice a blade. Mohini nodded. "Yes, it was his conspiracy all along. He was the one who plotted your father's death. And now he seeks to weaken you, to claim the throne himself. He works in shadows, gathering the disloyal, promising them wealth, power. Even now rebellion stirs in secret corners of your kingdom." The weight of her words crushed against him, but Mohini pressed on, her voice urgent, unwavering. "The Tamira tribe were his pawns. They slipped you this poison, not to kill you swiftly, but to chain you. For this venom is unlike any other. Your blood, Harshavardhan, has been transformed by it. And now," her eyes burned with a strange reverence, "now your blood is the only antidote for the epidemic spreading across the land." He staggered back, the enormity of it crashing through him. His voice was hoarse, almost disbelieving. "My blood, the cure?" "Yes." Mohini's voice trembled, but her gaze never wavered. "This is why time is not on our side. The poison consumes you slowly. Less than a month remains, and yet your veins carry the only hope for your people." Silence wrapped the chamber, thick and suffocating. The truth cut sharper than any blade. Finally, Mohini stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, her touch both anchor and fire. "We cannot fight this war alone. To crush Rajrishi's rebellion, to survive what is coming, we will need Arjun's strength, his loyalty. Without him, the kingdom will not hold." At the mention of Arjun, his brother-in-arms, his fiercest ally, Harshavardhan's jaw tightened. Memories surged, mingled with loyalty, pride, and the sting of betrayal he had not yet named. "Rajrishi killed my father." His voice broke, the torment raw, barely restrained. His eyes burned as he looked at her, searching her face for lies, for shadows, but finding only the unflinching truth in her gaze. "And you, Mohini," he whispered, his voice jagged with equal parts anguish and wonder. "You risked everything to bring me this truth. Even your life." Her eyes softened, luminous in the fading light. "I would risk more, Harshavardhan. You too would have done the same for me. If you were in my place, isn't it?" The confession lingered between them, tender and fierce, binding them tighter than any vow. Harshavardhan reached for her then, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheek as though she were the only truth left in his crumbling world. "Then we face this storm together," he vowed, his voice low, a growl of promise. "Rajrishi will pay. The throne will not fall." And Mohini, his forehead pressed to hers, his breath unsteady. "Never again will you vanish from me without a word." I will not survive it. The twilight deepened, shadows thickening like omens of war. But in that moment, beneath the gathering dark, two hearts stood unyielding, bound by love, haunted by betrayal, and braced for the reckoning yet to come. Chapter 19. The Weight of Truth. The palace hall lay shrouded in midnight silence. The air was heavy, as though every wall waited for an explosive secret to be unveiled. Vikram, Harshavardhan's childhood friend, his confidant, his shadow, had returned after a long absence. Now the king of Vaishali, he had once carved a place for Mohini deep within his heart. But tonight, there was no tenderness in his eyes, only fire. His voice was low yet sharp enough to slice through the stillness. Harsh, do you know who Mohini truly is? She is the princess of the Tamira tribe, the one who poisoned you with that slow, merciless venom. When I returned to Vaishali, I pursued the truth. And this is what I found. The hall echoed with his words, then fell into a silence heavy enough to crush the air itself. Harshavardhan's gaze did not waver. His face bore no surprise, no shock. His voice, when it came, was as calm and cutting as a blade's edge. Yes, Vikram. I have always known Vikram froze. Pain and disbelief warred within him. You knew. And yet you kept her by your side. I once asked her to leave with me to Vaishali and she refused. I thought it was her loyalty. Now I see it was deception. Harshavardhan's face carried the faintest trace of weariness, but his eyes were resolute. No, Vikram. It was not deception. I recognized her truth from the beginning. She came to me as the enemy's daughter, but she remained as the woman who buried every weakness of mine in silence. She made certain the poison in my blood never reached the ears of my foes. That is no enemy's deed. Vikram's heart twisted painfully. His eyes burned with anguish and jealousy. And you love her? Harshavardhan met his gaze unflinchingly. Yes. And I know your heart too carries the same space for her. But before I was a king, I was your friend. And as a friend, it was my duty to tell you the truth. His words were stone hard, but beneath them, sorrow pulsed like a hidden wound. What neither of them knew was that Mohini, standing in the shadows of the chamber, had heard it all. Her breath faltered. Her truth, her crime, her mask had been ripped away. And Harshavardhan's unwavering trust struck her soul with a force greater than any blade. Chapter 20. Questions and Answers. The night was thick with silence when Mohini slipped into Harshavardhan's chamber. Her steps were heavy, her eyes wet with grief. He stood by the window, the moonlight softening the hard lines of his face. Her voice, broken yet brave, reached him. You knew about me, my past, my tribe, my crime. Yet you never accused me, never punished me. Why, my lord? Why did you not hold me guilty for the poison that racked your every breath with agony? Harshavardhan turned slowly toward her. His eyes were steady, deep, and unyielding. Yes, Mohini. I was angry. In the beginning, the fire burned in me too. But a king is not guided by anger alone. He must see through intent. You were beside me, closer than anyone, with access to every secret I held. And yet, you never let my torment escape to the world. You veiled my pain, even from my enemies. Tell me, is that what an enemy would do? Tears spilled down Mohini's cheeks, guilt and reverence entwining in her heart. He stepped closer. His voice weighted with gravity. I tested you. Again and again. And each time, I found you truer than anyone else. That is why I allowed you, nearer than all others, into the chamber of my deepest trust. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I thought you would cast me away." I was guilty. Gently his hand lifted to cradle her face. His gaze softened, tender and protective. "You were never guilty, Mohini. You were my strength, and that is why I cannot let you go." A wave of emotion surged through her, fiercer than she had ever known. Respect deeper than love, love fiercer than fear. Her whisper broke like a vow carved from her soul. "You are the place where my honor begins, and where my existence completes." And in that moment, Mohini's heart steeled itself. She was no longer merely his beloved. She had become his shield, his fiercest armor. Final chapter. A kingdom restored, a love eternal. The battlefield lay quiet at last, the smoke of rebellion fading into the crimson horizon. The banners of Rajrishi's men lay trampled in the dust, his treachery silenced forever. Arjun's sword dripped with the victory of loyalty, his eyes burning with fierce satisfaction. At the heart of it all stood Harshavardhan, his robes torn, his crown smeared with the blood of battle, but his spirit unbroken. The kingdom was safe. The people were free from the chains of rebellion and the looming epidemic that had haunted their lives. For while Harshavardhan and Arjun crushed Rajrishi's plans, Mohini, swift, cunning, fearless, had slipped like a shadow into the sanctum of the Agastikas, Rajrishi's secretive medical order. There, with daring unmatched, she stole the antidote meant to remain hidden forever. Her heart had beat only with one vow: to save her king, no matter the cost. But fate was cruel. As they returned from the battlefield, the moon shone pale and merciless upon Harshavardhan. His steps faltered. His body, already ravaged by the poison's slow torment, gave way at last. He collapsed into the dust, his breath shallow, his skin burning cold. "Harshavardhan!" Mohini's scream tore the night. She fell to her knees, cradling his head in her lap, tears streaming as his eyes fluttered weakly open. I cannot." His voice broke, ragged with pain. "Perhaps destiny ends here." "Don't you dare," Mohini whispered fiercely, her hands trembling as she drew forth the vial she had risked her life to steal. "You promised me a life, Harshavardhan, and I promised you love. Neither vow breaks tonight." With desperate care, she pressed the antidote to his lips. For a heartbeat the world stilled, and Harshavardhan fainted. Next morning, like dawn breaking through a storm, Harshavardhan's eyes fluttered open. He lay upon his silken bed, the chamber hushed except for the anxious breaths of the royal physicians hovering around him. The pallor had lifted from his face, a flush of life returning as his chest rose in steady rhythm once more. The poison's cruel hold was broken. Life, fierce and glorious, surged back into him. And the very first sight he beheld was her, Mohini. Her veil had slipped away, revealing her tear-wet face, luminous in its unguarded beauty, her love blazing with a brilliance that shamed the moon itself. "Mohini." His voice was hoarse, ragged from battle and fever, yet steady, trembling with wonder. "You saved me." Her lips curved into a trembling smile as tears slipped down her cheeks, her whisper a vow carved from the soul. "You were always mine to save." And so, beneath the blessings of the gods and to the roar of a kingdom, reborn from treachery and plague, Harshavardhan took her hand, not in secrecy, not in shadow, but openly, proudly, as his queen. The palace bells pealed, carrying their music across the kingdom. Arjun stood tall, pride and loyalty shining in his eyes, while ministers bowed and people wept with joy. The rebellion was crushed, the epidemic banished, and love, pure, unyielding, eternal, had triumphed. Adorned in her bridal finery, Mohini walked at Harshavardhan's side, her place no longer hidden but exalted before the world. His gaze never strayed from her, fierce, protective, and tender, as though he drew the very breath of his soul from her presence. And as the setting sun kissed the skies with hues of gold and rose, the tale of poison and betrayal melted away, reborn into a saga of devotion, courage, and eternal love. For Harshavardhan had reclaimed not only his throne, not only his kingdom's freedom, but the one heart destined to beat beside his for all eternity. And Mohini, his love, his savior, his queen, stood at the place fate had carved for her long before, at his side, forever.